Hello, and you're very welcome back to this evening's presentation of Here Before. I hope you all enjoyed the film as much as I did. I just thought it was a masterclass in creating tension by director Stacey Gregg, as well as a really interesting mediation on grief by a Northern Irish woman. Excuse me. I'm joined now by director Stacey Gregg from London, I believe. Hi, Stacey.
That's right. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and meet our wonderful audience. I think you should be able to see there in Fotherburg Park in Galway,
Uh,
which is the next best thing
amazing.
to having you with us in person.
I wish I was there.
It would be great. So tell us. I'm just I'm so curious what it was like finishing your first feature in the time of COVID. It must have been a challenge to say the least.
Yeah. So we shot just before Christmas, and then we were in post when lockdown happened. So we halted for a little while we worked out what was going on. And then ultimately, I did most of the edit and post from my little spare room in my house remotely, which was quite a learning curve. But also kind of interesting, because there was a little hiatus, which actually was quite a good chance to catch my breath.
Sure.
Um, and then also, I think having completed the film that way, anything else will probably feel pretty straightforward in
Yeah, I can
comparison.
imagine.
Forward, yeah.
Do you
So
think it helped at all that you sort of didn't have a frame of reference? I mean, I know you've made shorts as well, but was there sort of I don't know, something missing, like a drop of creativity when your whole crew went away and suddenly you were by yourself in your room?
I mean, that it was incredibly challenging because I think in order to be creative, a lot of the time you're nourishing yourself, and there's stimulation, and it's a sort of ongoing process. So to be cut off from that, and also just to be cut off socially from chats, and working with people in the room, that definitely was tough. So I would say on balance that was harder than the breath I got to catch. If I could
Sure.
trade off one for the other, I definitely would have edited the normal way. But everyone, the team were great, and everyone was very supportive of each other, and we got a workflow going pretty quickly, so it wasn't too painful in the end.
That's great. And listen, the work shows on the screen. Again, I just think it was such an amazing first feature. I also wanted to ask, just sticking with the idea of your first time out as director on this, how does one come to work with the amazing Andrea Riseborough for the leading role of your first film?
What a great question. I mean, I wish I knew the answer to that. Only Andrea can answer that, really. But it obviously was an incredible, experience to work with her. And when we were casting, I had always had Andrea in mind for a bunch of reasons, and I followed her career. And when we were casting, we had a chat, and at one point, I was just like, let's shoot for the moon." And so I wrote her a letter, basically, describing the film, and how I thought we might work together, and my admiration for her work. And she was, amazing. She was on a shoot. She read it really quickly. Was into it. We arranged to meet up. We chatted. We clicked. And ultimately that has to happen. But it just felt like there was something really good there. And then she came on board, and it was incredible working with her. She's just a proper artist, and she, one of the things that was most rewarding was when we were in the edit. There was just so much. She's always giving you options, and they can be very subtle. But she, was so committed to that part. And it was a relatively small budget. We didn't have a lot of luxuries. We all went bowling with all the kids that were involved in the film
Ah,
beforehand.
nice.
All the cast. And there was just a really great atmosphere. And yeah, working with Andrea was just a massive treat, and I'm so grateful.
Yeah, and you mentioned, like sticking with casting, uh, discovering little Neve and Lewis, two amazing, like first roles for both, right, as actors, or certainly for Neve anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I worked, so that was something I was excited about very early on, finding the kids. And I work with Carla Strong, casting in Belfast, who are incredible. And that, I love casting. I come from a theatre background and I perform myself. And, there's nothing I love more than, auditions. I just think they're really fun and they can be magical. And Neve is a really great example of that. She just had something, the je ne sais quoi, and she is an old soul, but she's really mischievous. And what was really amazing about working with Neve at the time was she didn't usually learn sides, so we would go through the beats in rehearsal, and then there would be this sort of breath and flexibility because she's very able for improvising as well, and that's a way that I love to work. So I'll probably do a take that's pretty much what's on the page, and then when we get that, then I start to let it breathe. And both the kids were incredible at working that way. And again, Lewis as well, as an actor who was very much on the cusp of childhood and adulthood, and that part of Tag who's like, oh, he's always watching. He's one of the most honest, um, people that we meet. And they were both incredible at delivering those characters, but also just to have on set, we had a lot of fun, even though it was freezing.
That's great. Well, Irish weather.
Yeah,
Um, you
beautiful.
mentioned your theatre background. So what's motivated this new move into film? I mean, this is your first feature. Have you wrapped on the second, or you're still working on the second and
So
prepping
the
for it?
second feature, my second feature, I'm still working on, and then I had a feature wrap that I'd written that's directed by someone else, and I'm currently working on something I'm directing for TV. So it's all go, and I think I was always drawn to screen. I always knew I wanted to explore that. When I first started out, I really, you don't, for me, I would never have started out and gone, I'm going to be a film director. I didn't even know what that meant or how on earth to start. Um, so I started writing because that was something I could do while I worked. So then my sort of body of work as a playwright started to grow, and then I started writing for screen. And then a couple of years ago, I was like, I really kind of had the itch. I directed quite a lot of theatre, and I thought, I'll make a short film, see how that goes. It went well. I loved it. I surprised myself. I got the bug, and then relatively quickly, Here Before had some steam behind it, and I kind of almost found myself in it, which is again not. I know it's not something that happens all the time, so I'm very grateful to the cosmic forces that got me there. And yeah, I guess it was truth. It's something that I've always wanted at the back of my mind to come round to, but I think I wasn't ready, or I didn't know how to before. And now, uh,
It's
I'm
great.
ready.
It's great that the system works when someone like you without a background wants to do it, and we get a film like this.
Yeah,
And I did want to talk to you about writing it as well. I love talking with people about their scripts, and I'm curious. It's such a, I've mentioned the tension that you bring to this film, and I'm curious how, when you were writing it, did the structure, was it a balancing act between, playing with the audience expectations and, still, and this theme of grief that this woman is going through? Did one of those kind of come to the fore when you were writing the scenes? How did that work?
absolutely. Yes, it absolutely was a balancing act, and I never wanted the film to feel like trickery. Uh, and it was always important to me that it's not about plot, or it was never how do I say it? Um, I was more interested in how interpretations and truths can coexist, and so the balance, especially towards the end, as things start to reveal themselves to us and we start to pull those things together, is less that we get all the answers, but that there are various interpretations. And certainly Laura lands in a place of doubling down on what she believed. She's always been here, and somehow these adults and this family have to cobble a way forward together, and that was the place where I wanted to land. So what we know, how we know it, at what point, when, and how we disclose that was always such a fine thing, right from developing the script through to very much so in the edit. The tiniest look or a little bit of dialogue could very much push an audience in one direction or the other. And for me as an artist across well, any medium, so when I work in theatre or anything else, I'm always very excited about multiple interpretations. So it was a kind of aspiration, and a lot of the films that I love, they don't they don't tell you what to think. They don't wrap things up. There is a sense of life being complicated and messy and somehow going on. So all of those things definitely went into that balancing act, and also just to take the emotional states and the psychological states of these characters seriously. So the idea was never that plot should be driving those things, but that we should feel like we are in those moments with Laura.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. And developing the visual language of that as well. You mentioned the kind of films that you enjoy. Were there particular touchstones for you that you had in mind, or when you were developing the look and feel of this film?
Yeah, I mean, quite various, but so the visual feel for the film came from a number of inspirations. So the literature of Elizabeth Bowen, the visual art of Willie Doherty, the portraiture of Loretta Lux. I've talked a lot about a letter that Nick Cave wrote about his son and loss. There were a lot of influences that way that went into it. In terms of films, um, nothing explicit, but obviously you, as a filmmaker, you sublimate so many things. And almost after making the film, I was reflecting on films like Picnic at Hanging Rock, Three Women, Todd Haynes Is Safe, Cachet. Those films that are very atmospheric and often and quite unresolved. Those are films that I've always loved, and so I guess a lot of that went into the I guess the way I went about trying to build the visual language of Here
Sure.
Before.
Yeah, it can be surprising what you recall sometimes when you're working on something.
Completely. A film that's been mentioned a lot is Don't Look Now. And it wasn't top of my mind, but it's been interesting in terms of the response to the film. And of course, that's an amazing film. So, all of this stuff is clearly
Yeah,
somewhere.
rattling around in there.
Yeah, yeah.
I also wanted to ask, so going back to grief, was the original idea, was that like the impetus for it all, like this woman, Andrea's character, and her grief?
Yeah, no, see, to be honest, no. And I find it quite fascinating that has come to sort of lead so much. I mean, I think of it as a psychological drama, and I know that it often gets billed as a thriller. And I think that there are a number of reasons for that. It clearly uses genre elements and subverts them in ways. And also Andrea, I think, sometimes brings with her.
We might have lost Stacey. We'll just give that a moment. Hi, everybody at the park. Bear with us. We'll try and get Stacey back. This is how you know it's live, folks. And remember as well, if anybody has any specific questions you want me to ask, just tweet them at Galway Film or with #FilmFla. Stacey's coming back in, I believe.
Technology.
Hey, there we go.
What was I talking about? Mystery.
Subverting genre elements, I think we were at, yeah.
Oh, I lost my thread a little bit. What was the question? And I'll
Not to worry. Do you know what I'm going to hop on? Because I also wanted to ask you before we run out of time about working with Chloe Thompson, and this as well, I guess, goes back to what I was asking about, visual imagery. I was fascinated how so many of the spaces and the way the shots were framed, they seem to be bisected, and Andrew always seemed to be pushing boundaries, whether it was the boundary of a fence or a tree line. always framed in doorways, like in two spaces, and that was obviously very intentional as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Chloe's incredible, and when we met, she immediately had a response to what she called the poetry of the piece. I always feel a bit shy using these terms, but I have to get more bold. But yeah, she really responded to that, and I loved that that was what she cared about. And I think that comes through in the composition. I knew that I wanted to be very lean and very composed, and a lot of those GVs, so the imagery that often gets sort of left on the cutting room floor, that was stuff that we both were very alive to. So we were always sort of trying to scoop that up, even though the schedule was tight and we were running out of daylight. We knew it would be important. So I think to speak that visual language with someone is kind of crucial, especially when you're fighting against time. Uh, but yeah, negative space, the presence of absence, these were all sort of touchstones that we came up with and committed to at the very top of the process. But one of the main ones for me was an elegance and an economy. So for me, if you can shoot something in one and just get out of the way, it's my favorite way to do it. And if you can feel something extra in the framing of that, something subtextual or semiotic, then that's the sweet spot. So yeah, I'm very very grateful to have worked with her, and very pleased that that feels like it's something that has really landed with audiences.
So effective. Particularly think for other Irish filmmakers watching this, I particularly sort of lament sometimes the drab domestic interiors that we get in a lot of films, but things like the sort of three-way mirror in the room just transformed an ordinary space into something completely different. You guys did an amazing job transforming the domestic spaces.
I think that's right. I think that was not a concern, but I think when there's been a often whenever something feels like it's domestic, people think that it means small or unambitious or uncinematic, and of course those things don't necessarily need to be true at all. It's not what you're telling; it's how you tell it. And my aspiration for this film was always to marry the what felt like the sort of suburban mundane with something cinematic and elevated. And I often said at the beginning of sessions, I'd be like, I want to feel something when someone's putting the bin out, and it rumbles, and there's something other and uncanny. And so I got a real kick out of that. The condenser fan was another one of those shots that I was, was a sort of a touchstone for that marriage of the ordinary and the extraordinary.
That's great. There's definitely I don't know, not a supernatural vibe, but some kind of a vibe going through it. That's great. Maybe just by way of wrapping up as well, I'd like to ask, obviously at the FLA, we love Irish film. We want to be a champion for Irish stories. In as much as this is or isn't a Northern Irish film, or you think of it as a Northern Irish film, was that in your mind making it, or was there any particular representation of Northern Ireland that you wanted to make?
Absolutely. I think, I've wanted to tell, Northern Irish stories all my time writing and making, and at times it's been really difficult. And with this, the Northern Irishness of it, I wanted to really explore the landscape. I wanted to. There's something very specific about the place of your upbringing. So that sort of rural urban fringe of Belfast, which is what I was going for. All the subtext of that, the socioeconomic subtext, and also, how we deal with grief. And I don't know, it just felt at one stage when we're trying to get financed, and it was a really tough road. We, as an exercise, I almost don't want to say this, but as an exercise, my producers were like, "Can maybe it's American?" So I did a little pass of like a few scenes, and it just didn't translate. There was something that was baked in to the piece that had a specificity to it, some of which is maybe more obvious, and some of which was more subtle. But the Northern Irish of it was key, and also the representation of of a strong mother, not a hysterical woman.
Sure.
And me growing up in Belfast, I was surrounded by women like that who got on with it and who were strong and who somehow managed to keep going. And so, yeah, I think that there are many reasons that that kind of representation felt really specific and really important to me.
Great. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll see the American remake in 5 years' time, and we'll all be like, the Irish one was better. I liked the Stacey Gregg version.
Yeah, who knows?
Well, listen, it was a genuine pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for your patience as well with our tech difficulties.
Oh, no,
I hope we can have you in person at a future FLA with your next projects.
I hope so very much. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. Slán. Bye.
Bye.